I said that when I first came in, preaching is a little superfluous this morning, and I feel the same way. This is Independence Sunday, the Sunday before Independence Day, the 4th of July. And so I want to take just a few minutes to lay before you what I call, and what has been called, 4 fragile freedoms. I'm going to give you a test. You know, have you read Buddy Shurden's book, 4 Fragile Freedoms? Okay, all right. Well, be sure you read that book. Walter Shurden, Buddy Shurden, a little old to be called Buddy these days, but we call him that. I called him a year or so ago when he was on his morning walk about his book and something that he had said. 4 fragile freedoms, based upon growing out of our sense of freedom of religion, separation of church and state, soul freedom, all of it blending together. Our freedom is the gift of God. We may maintain it, but it is God's gift to us. Any kind of bondage is an affront to God. Better hear that. Any kind of bondage is an affront to God. It's an affront to His creation. Now, all of you who have heard me try to preach for 50-something years may recall that I have, from time to time, well, pretty constantly, been rather critical of Baptists. Y'all do remember that. Particularly Southern Baptists. And so when I say these are Baptist distinctives, I want to qualify it by saying these are the traditional, historical Baptist traditions. Many of the modern day contemporary Baptists would not own these. These are the historic freedoms, 4 fragile freedoms, that were enunciated and made real in the life of Baptists from the very beginning. The first decade of their being in the 17th century, when they came into being in England. So I'm going to mention them, 4 fragile freedoms. The first is soul freedom. E.Y. Mullins is the first perhaps to have brought that to light in America. He was a Princeton man, as nearly everybody was in the beginning of the Southern Seminary in Louisville. They were all Princeton guys. And this is the thing they held to as much as anything, that we are free before God, which is what soul freedom means. E.Y. Mullins called it the competence of the soul, or soul competence, which is to be said, every one of us is free to come to God for himself and herself, and we're competent so to do. God is open to every one of us. So briefly stated, here's the definition. We are created in the image of God, and we have direct personal access to God, without restrictions, without approval or disapproval of authorities, or without their direction of church or state. Freedom to approach God for yourself and to express it in your own way or not express it. The priesthood of every believer. Uncontrolled, uncoerced, undirected. It is a precious gift, but it is also very fragile. And we can give it away. And so I want to challenge you on this day just to remember that there are people who have sacrificed for this freedom. And there are men and women through the centuries who have given their lives for this freedom. Soul freedom, then Bible freedom. Freedom to approach the Bible, biblical truth, pursue the message of the Bible without coercion, without mandated, required statements or of belief or interpretation. You are free before God to approach the Bible for yourself. Freedom that we don't take advantage of, by the way. We do a great deal more talking about how we love the old book than we do reading the old book, don't we? A freedom that we've neglected, or that we have made ourselves vulnerable and victims of every half-baked quackery of charlatans who thrive on the uninformed. I could have been a little more crude and said they thrive on the ignorant. I'll just say they thrive on the uninformed. Because we talk more, as I say, about the Bible than we do looking at it. But we do it in the company of other believers. We do not do it in isolation. The fact that I have access to the Bible on my own and may approach it on my own does not mean that I pull back from other believers. I share what I believe about the Bible with you, as you share what you believe with me. And we test what we believe by each other's belief. We are responsible to each other, but we're not controlled by each other. The second great freedom, fragile, is Bible freedom. Then there is church freedom. Separation of church and state. Maybe one of the most important sentences ever written is the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. The religious clause, the First Amendment. There are 5 clauses in that amendment. Congress shall make no law touching the separation, touching the what? The sponsorship. Say it for me. Who can say the next words? Congress shall make no law what? Establishment of religion or to prohibit the free exercise thereof. Ben, let's lead it all, everybody say it together. All right. Congress shall make no law. What's the word? Touching? All right. Y'all don't know it, do you? Establishing religion or to prohibit the free exercise thereof. Now, whether you can say it or not, you know the truth of it, don't you? It's not Congress's business to establish a religion. It is Congress's business to protect us from those who would use us, and it is also the business of Congress to be sure that we do not insist on other people believing what we believe before they are accepted. Or a lot that we can say about it. But the conversation between Jesus and his critics about Caesar and taxes applies to church and individuals. Caesar has his right to certain things, and we give him his right, but his rights are limited. God is God, and he does not deserve our taxes or our money or our property. He deserves all of us, all that we are. Church and state entanglement is dangerous beyond words, and many churches have sacrificed their birthright for a mess of political pottage. Now, you need to hear that. The historians said that, and I suppose they're right, that we are the only nation, at least at the time that our Constitution was written, who brought ourselves into being without giving a favorable status to one religion. And you think about that a minute. No religion has favorable status in our country. No religion. Didn't say Christian religion. No religion. One of the most memorable times that I had, and this is all many years ago, and I was in a revival with an old friend of mine, Stuart Kersey, in Orange, Virginia. And Orange County is a huge county. At the time, in colonial times, it went as far north as Chicago, Orange County, Virginia. James Madison is from Orange, Virginia. And when I was in the days of the revival there, we went out a little ways out of Orange, Virginia to Montpelier, the home of James Madison. Randolph Scott was living in it at the time. You know, I didn't know who Randolph Scott was. And I was shown, and it always has stayed in my mind, the big oak tree. It's probably 300, 400 years old, big oak tree. And it covered out over benches and everything all around. The word is that when the Bill of Rights was being discussed and the Constitution was about to be ratified, that John Leland, a Baptist leader, spent the day with James Madison on the bench under that oak tree. John Leland made a proposition, because these were folks who were pretty wily politically. And this is the deal that was struck. And so it may be a apocryphal story, but I believe it's true. John Leland promised James Madison his support and the support of Baptists, Methodists, and Presbyterians for the ratification of the Constitution if the religious clause could be included in the Bill of Rights. And James Madison agreed. We have the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law concerning the establishment of religion, or prohibit the free exercise thereof. Don't take it cheaply. It is a precious gift, but it is a fragile freedom. Church and state intermingling may be one of the greatest dangers of the generation in which we live. The last one is religious liberty, just plain old religious freedom. The broad term, you're free. You really are free. Some of us don't like freedom. I know some people who would rather be told what to think or what to believe than work it out for themselves. It takes a little work to do that. You are really free. They all grow out of soul freedom. You are free, so is everyone else, made possible by the separation of church and state. It all works together. Anytime anyone is deprived of his or her and his, and they work on keeping it straight, the order of it, hers and his, religious freedom, we are all diminished. Say it again. Anytime anyone is deprived of her or his religious freedom, we are all diminished. When you take someone else's freedom away from him or her, you not only harm that person, you diminish yourself. I'm going to run down the list, a little roster here of people who had something to say about freedom of religion in their day, and they all have something to do with Baptists. One of them was George W. Truett. You all remember George W. Truett? He was pre-W.A. Criswell. Did y'all know they had a pastor in Dallas before W.A. Criswell? The non-Baptists here do not appreciate what you do. George W. Truett, one of the greatest pastors we ever produced. He was there for nearly 50 years. And he delivered a famous address on the Capitol steps in the 30s. He was a fierce advocate of religious freedom. Freedom of religion in America. Included in his address, I want to read you something that he said. Baptists make this contention, George W. Truett said, not only for themselves, mark it well, but as well for all others, for Protestants, for all denominations, for Romanists, that's another word for Catholic, for Jews, for Quakers, for Turks, what's that? That's Muslim, or pagans, for all men everywhere. To insist on religion, freedom of religion for me is to insist on freedom of religion for you or anybody else. We're going to just take another move forward. John Leland, who I mentioned, sat under the oak tree in Orange, Virginia years ago. In 1791, he wrote a document entitled The Rights of Conscience Inalienable, in which he said, government has no more right, no more to do with the religious opinions of men than it has to do with the principles of mathematics. Leland added, let every man speak freely without fear, maintain the principle that he believes, worship according to his own faith, either one God or three gods or no God or 20 gods, and let the government protect him as he does. Leland was no eccentric. E.Y. Mullins, that I mentioned about soul freedom, said, Baptists believe in religious liberty for themselves, but they believe in it equally for every other person. You see, it's tied together. I cannot demand a freedom for myself that I do not give to you. Neither can you. But I want to go all the way back to 1612 for the last little sentence here. Baptists came into being by the name Baptist under the leadership of people like Thomas Helwys and John Smith. You know where we see those names in? Smith Helwys Publications of the Incorporated Baptist Fellowship. Thomas Helwys and John Smith were pioneers who brought into being the first church called Baptist outside of London at Spitalfield. And in 1612, Helwys wrote he was a layman, he wasn't a minister, a short declaration of the mystery of iniquity. And many historians say that it's the first real plea for complete religious freedom in the English language. Religious freedom was almost unheard of, did you know that? But Brashley, and he did a thing that really got him into trouble. He inscribed a handwritten note on this pamphlet of his and sent a copy of it to King James. You know who King James was?
Yeah. James Bob.
He's the one that brought into being by his authorization the King James Version of the Bible, so you need to remember this story about King James. And he reminded the king that you are a mortal man and you're not God, and therefore you have no power over the immortal souls of his subjects. And within the document itself, Helwys affirmed loyalty to the state. Yes, we're loyal to the state. The limitations of the state and the principle of religious liberty. And he said, I close with this sentence, let them be heretics or Turks, the code name for Muslim, or Jews or whatsoever. It appertains not to the earthly power to punish them in the least measure. And why should the powers of the state keep their hands off folks' souls? Helwys gave the same reason that we've been trying to say all day. Because, in Helwys' words, men's religion to God is between God and themselves. The doctrine of full religious liberty that's now taken for granted was perilous, heretical, dangerous. Helwys paid the price for what he said and for sending his pamphlet to the king. He was promptly thrown into prison, and he died there 4 years later. I guess what I'm trying to say is that people have given their lives for these precious freedoms that we take for granted. 4 fragile freedoms: soul freedom, Bible freedom, church freedom, religious freedom for all. Remembered on this 4th of July, what many Americans have forgotten. May we never forget.